We're beginning our session with a land acknowledgement. The cartoon Crossroads Columbus acknowledged the ancient ancestors of the Eastern Woodlands tribes, now referred to as the Adena and Hopewell cultures, inhabited the land we know as Ohio. Their descendants include the living nations of the Shawnee, Miami, Wyandotte, Delaware, and Seneca Cayuga. We honor and respect the diverse indigenous peoples connected to this place where we gather. We would also like to thank our sponsors, including the Greater Columbus Arts Council, the Ohio Arts Council, White Castle, Columbus Foundation, UBS, and the Japan Foundation, and our other festival sponsors. All these programs and the expo are free to attend because of their support. I am Emi Gennis. I'm a cartoonist and an educator. I teach comics here at the Columbus College of Art and Design. I am here to talk about the Nib today with Matt Bors, a cartoonist and editor-in-chief and founder of the Nib, as well as Ben Passmore, another cartoonist and regular contributor to the Nib. I'd also like to thank Tyler, our volunteer, who is making these slides loop as though PowerPoint worked. And also thank you all for being here. So, Matt, I was talking to you yesterday because I knew that one of my questions was going to be how this started. And you were talking about how you were just in the right place at the right time. And when the Nib started, like 10 years ago, there was a lot of tech money being put into content, a lot of different websites that just wanted to pour money into things like this. Yeah. So you were just at the right place and the right time. And so I am curious, like, what that right place was and, like, why was it you, right? Like, you sounded like maybe this could have, other comics could have gotten this kind of platform or money, but, like, why was it you and why was the Nib? How did that happen? Well,
it started on Medium in 2013, which if you know what that is, it's a blogging platform founded by Ev Williams, who is the founder of Twitter and Blogger. So he's a billionaire, and this new platform was sort of obviously it had a ton of funding behind it, venture capital, VC, San Francisco money, and also at the time, online media was exploding, and there was a ton of money being injected into online media. BuzzFeed News, Gawker, Vice. That the 2010s was the era of all that stuff, and now it's over in a major way. A lot of those places, including the Nib, don't exist anymore. So the story of, like, the funding of the Nib is really, it's more of a media thing than a comics thing, because this type of money doesn't usually exist in comics, at least unless you're publishing books and there's actually money. For a while there wasn't any revenue strategy. So I'll tell this I have never told before in public, so this maybe will make it interesting. Around the time that in 2013, I guess in the summer of 2013, at like the beginning of the summer of 2013, I was doing comics editing for this magazine called Not Safe for Work Corp. And I did this comic for CNN.com. It was about, like, bashing on millennials, which at the time was a big thing. And, now it's Zoomers, I guess. But at the time, I did this comic, like, kind of defending millennials. And it blew up in a major way. It was like literally 1 million people read it in a day type thing. It was a big thing going around the internet. And then David Axe, who I'd done a graphic novel with called War's Boring, he was doing some writing for Medium, which was like pre-launch. So at almost the exact same time, I got sort of like 3 offers that were, felt like they were going to change the course of my career. CNN, off of this viral piece, was going to offer me like a weekly illustrated column or something. And it felt like I could really, go far with that if I wanted to pursue political cartooning and sort of punditry, if I wanted to, go the pundit route almost. And then Not Safe for Work Corp was gonna, not hire me as a staffer, but, like, hire me more full time, and I could, like, do what I wanted and in print and do longer comics, shorter comics. And then Medium, I pitched on a comics section because they were throwing a bunch of money around. And the basic premise was, I can gather all these early, like, web cartoonist people, political cartoonists, and nonfiction, which is sort of emerging at the time and doesn't exist in a major way, under one umbrella, and that this stuff would, get what I'm communicating with them. It's more about like eyeballs and reader engagement and stuff. That's the stuff they respond to. Not we want to creatively support, editorial cartoonists and do cool, really great stuff and lefty politics. That's not the stuff that turns their gears. So they were into that, and so none of them seeing it was like I had to choose which one was gonna like be stable or lead to something long term, and I really chose correctly because the CNN thing, I mean, who knows? I don't think it would have lasted that long. And then the Not Safe for Work Corp, they folded, the next year, and then the Nib, went on to become what it became.
So what made you choose that one of those three?
I mean, I had wanted to do a publication for a while. We both know Aaron Polgreen, who founded Symbolia, which existed in the same time frame as Not Safe for Work Corp, which was sort of this 2012 era where it seemed like iPads would take off and like iPad publications were sort of a thing, and then it didn't happen, and everybody just stuck with smartphones and stuff. But I remember when Aaron started Symbolia, which we both did work for, that was kind of like, I mean, they were doing the Nib before the Nib. And I remember talking to her about it and just being like, oh, you're doing like my dream job. My dream job would be to run a comics journalism publication. And they didn't have political cartoons. My own, proclivities made me want to include that into it. So I think it's that. It's like, I've always been motivated by like trying to get cartoonists paid and all those other editing gigs. I've done In These Times magazine, Not Safe for Work Corp. I was editing comics at this place called Cartoon Movement before that. They've always sort of come from, I pitch myself and I get in, and then I'm like, try to get more money, and I'm just like, hey, why don't you just give me a budget to do more of this, and I'll get more people, and then it will be popular. And, it worked. So I was, and I even had ambitions really to do like a print magazine way back then too. I wanted to do print, wanted to do a lot of stuff. So that was like my foothold into starting this and getting to do what I wanted to do.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Ben, did you ever do work for Symbolia?
No.
Yeah, that's how I started. I said this last night, if any of you were at the after party, that it was 2013, I think, when Aaron approached me and was like, oh, like you make comics that are like researched and nonfiction, and they've been history. It's like, that means that you could do journalism. I'm like, I'd have to talk to like people that are alive and stuff. That sounds intimidating. And I made that comic about juggalos.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Because they were suing the FBI at the time. And so I talked to a bunch of juggalos about the lawsuit and like all the legal stuff around that. And then I was a comics journalist, and so then when you started Medium, you were like, oh, you're a comics journalist.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's definitely a thing. But obviously you were finding people all over the place. Like you found Ben, presumably, at some point. Do you remember how that happened?
Right.
Well,
Naked in the woods.
Yeah.
I don't. Ben would remember more than me. I mean, Ben's got a good story of him contacting me when he was in college, and I guess I blew him off or something.
That's right.
Sorry. Honestly, it's like the Nib was this like nonstop fire hose where we were publishing like 3 to 4 things a day, and very quickly after we launched, I started getting help from Larry Harris, and Maddie Lubchansky started working with me pretty closely after like 6 months, and it was constant for 10 years. I mean, we published 5 days a week. So I have lost track of like what, like I don't remember what Ben's first comic was at this point.
Ben, what was your first comic for the Nib?
My first comic was like a longer piece about going to a Klan rally in Stone Mountain, Georgia, and getting arrested on a charge, a masking charge, which was a law created to try and battle the Klan, but predictably was used on anti-racist people.
Yeah, I remember during the protests in 2020, I'm like, oh, sick. They can't do anything about this now. I mean, they can, but, it's just like, oh, we're all in masks now.
Right, yeah.
And I think I remembered that comic and reading that. My first comic for the Nib, because you had reached out and asked me to pitch you something, and I was like, yeah, sure, I'll get around to it. And then at some point it was like, hey, did you know that there are people that drill holes in their heads and like think that they'll reach enlightenment? Can I talk to them and make a comic about it? You're like, yes, that's crazy. Just absolutely.
Yeah, I remember that one for sure.
Absurd premise for I mean, I guess that's like how publications are supposed to work, but the fact that I could just email someone like, hey, I have an insane idea, can you give me money for it, is wild. But the first iteration of the Nib at Medium ended, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, in the great pivot to video debacle.
Yeah, I don't know if everybody was pivoting to video then. There's been a couple pivots to video, and then even we did Nib animation at the second company we were with, and that was kind of part of a, 2017 pivot to video. So that was going on, but I don't think it was because Medium was pivoting to video. It was just, Medium has had this weird thing over the years where it's like they have in-house publications, and then they get rid of them, and then they brought in other ones. Like they kind of brought in like established ones, like I'm not forgetting, but let's just say like MSNBC or something, like big names, and then they have them cross post all their stuff there for a few years. Then they just get rid of it, and then they do it again. They're still around. I don't know that they really do anything with publications anymore. But it was honestly just kind of like it was one of those things where you're like in meetings with all these people. They're really supportive of everything you're doing, and everything seems fine. And it's maybe annoying in a lot of ways. You have to deal with business and marketing people, but then it's like really just like on a dime. It's like they have a meeting and decide for some reason that they need to, all these tech companies are like, breaking fast, move things type ideology. And it's just like, no, like this isn't working. It's not delivering. They're after like hockey stick user growth, not even readership. 1 million people could have read the Nib a day. It really wouldn't have mattered because they weren't trying to figure out a model to support publications. They were figuring out how to like jumpstart the use of the platform as a thing, really they were kind of trying to do what Substack has done, I think, more than anything else.
Yeah, I know. O'Leary was telling me that what you said his name was Ev Williams, is that right? She said that she spent like an hour at his house going over all kinds of things about the Nib, and then like a few weeks later was fired.
Yeah, we should definitely say it definitely wouldn't have been his house. I think it would have been the offices at Medium. I think we gotta make sure we're clear on that publicly, or else it would be weird. But yeah, it was like the interview process was that you would spend a rather long interview with him personally, which is kind of weird. He was okay. Certainly didn't know him well or work closely with him. But yeah, unfortunately, Larry wasn't, the story of the Nib at both these media companies is like I was hired first, and then it was like they wouldn't give me a staff job for other people until 6 months or a year later. Yeah. So they're contractors, and then with Larry, it was really like she got hired, and it was a few weeks probably later that they laid us all off.
Yeah, but that reflects what you were saying about kind of like pivoting on a dime. And,
yeah.
But I remember the first iteration ending, and you had kickstarted that anthology. So in between of the first iteration and the second iteration, had this anthology coming out. Did you see the Nib like continuing beyond? It was just a matter of like how to make that happen.
Yeah, we were planning. I was planning for the nib to end at Medium before it started. I mean, I made sure that before I signed my contract, I went and bought the nib.com for like $2,500 and had a logo made that I paid for myself and did a contract with the guy and made sure that like I owned the nib and there was nothing in my contract with Medium that would say that they owned it, and which they didn't, you know, to their credit, didn't care about. Wasn't a big deal to them. It's not why they were in it. And so, you know, I wasn't naive. I mean, I was aware that it wasn't going to last forever. And, you know, I probably would have guessed it would last longer than 2 years, but
Was it only 2 years?
2013 to 2015,
Wow.
you know, it might have been 2.5 if you, I forget exactly what the time frame was. But even that Kickstarter was actually in the works at Medium when they did it. So I just kind of launched it myself and did it myself. And then, but we weren't publishing online. That was like that was the only interruption in between in the Nibs publishing schedule was like that. I guess it was, I would say probably summer 2015 to like, you know, early 2016.
During which time you published an anthology that was then nominated for an Eisner.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, pretty
That
decent gap.
Well, it had your Treepan comic in it.
Yes, it did, and it also had the comic, the Doomed Expeditions comic that got me the book deal.
Right.
So, were you in that anthology?
I don't think so.
You would remember.
No, I don't think. I don't think that was Ben era.
No, I'm a more recent addition.
So I'm curious about how the second iteration happened, and actually, Tyler, if you'll like go back in the slides to just keep hitting back for a second. There are some images of Matt like speaking in front of a bunch of stuff. Yeah, that.
Wow. Yeah.
And like actually go to the slide before that. So like the second iteration, obviously, like somehow you got hooked up with First Look.
Yeah.
But then you also launched it at the DNC and made like a physical publication for that. So like, how did all of that happen?
Well, so yeah, First Look Media is a company that mostly known for publishing The Intercept, which they're now separating from, and Intercept's going its own way or something. I don't know why, but I'm sure it's similar to, you know, reasons why we don't work for them anymore and stuff. But they also were founded by a billionaire who was getting into media and put a lot of money into The Intercept and was very hands off with it. And I felt like they were politically aligned with the Nib and, you know, importantly, not a platform. They were actually about publications and stuff. So I got a meeting in there. I was actually meeting with a lot of people at the time. I mean, it's kind of funny. I mean, I met with like Ben Smith of BuzzFeed and Vice people and Matt Iglesias and Ezra Klein of Vox. They were the Vox founders at the time.
Oh,
and,
wow.
like, you know, talking to all the high rollers. And, but First Look was the one that was like really into it. And, you know, sort of same deal. They were going to give me plenty of money to publish comics. And I think the deal this time, you know, in retrospect, I think clearly what they were interested in was the animation that we ultimately did for them, which was a lot of fun. But it was like they were trying to figure out ways to make money and make content. And I think the fact that I had access to all these creators that, you know, we ended up doing cool animations. Ben made one. I think that was like a big reason actually why they brought us in, as opposed to like the stuff I wanted to do, which was the magazine, which I did launch under them and they were supportive of, but I don't think it was like, you know, it wasn't their idea or something that was going to make them a lot of money, certainly.
Was the animation stuff something that you had like thought about prior to First Look talking to you about it? Was that something that you had foreseen or?
No, it's always been something that I've thought I would like to do. If you know, I don't have like the resources or the talent on an animator or anything like that. So I was given a chance to do it and it was really cool. But, unlike comics, animation can't just happen by yourself or with a few people. And so there's, and again, they paid a ridiculous amount of money, I'm sure, to have that made. I'm not really privy to how much it costs, but we work with the Augenblick Studios, who does a lot of great animation for like Adult Swim and Cartoon Network and stuff. I mean, it couldn't have been cheap. And there was also no money associated with, no revenue associated with it. They just put it online, and millions of people did see it. It was in that like Facebook video era of 2017. Really fun to work on. Didn't make them any money.
From right there. They were so fun. So you made one?
I think I was part of making two.
What was that like?
Practically it was just Matt being like, do you want to do keyframes on an animation? And I think both were, it'll surprise everyone, they were related to cop shit. So I think one was like a trailer for a horror movie, a slasher that ended up being the slasher and being a cop. And and then the other one was like a zany police academy that someone had written.
It was like Police Academy type.
Right, but they're all monsters.
Yeah.
Like I think there was a Nazi police dog, I think, involved.
Yeah, you had like funny characters. Yeah, I guess somebody else did write that.
Someone else wrote it. Yeah.
I forget who, but yeah, it was like, they had the guy that was like always dropping his gun that was going off.
Yeah, well,
Nazi guy.
It's funny. The Augenblick thing is funny because this is like I think true for most of the cartoons that like worked for the Nib, but like there's all these like points in which some work I did for the Nib like turned into work later. So they hit me up to do some production design for like a pitch package.
Gemma Correll does some like PBS show that's they produce it all in her style, and I mean I think that came from her working on a couple of Nib animations with them too.
Yeah, it's incredible. So then obviously we didn't get to the DNC part. How did you get to the DNC? What was that?
Yeah, that was so for the DNC, those optimistic days before Trump won, and we mostly didn't think he was gonna win.
I did. I lived in rural Kansas though, so I kind of had a different window than everyone else did.
It was like, well, I'll tell you what it was, and then I'll explain why it happened. It was this like, big relaunch of the Nib, and they rented out this art gallery in Philadelphia. And as you saw, there was a big cartoon in the front window. They basically hired these sort of event people, I guess, like graphic designers and stuff, and we would draw a thing each day, and then they'd go get it printed out in like these squares, and like we paste it up, and it was cool. We were reacting to the news in real time. Like Debbie Wasserman Schultz was sort of had a controversy at the DNC, and we had like a thing on the front window about it the next day. I mean, it was super cool, but it was a result of when you work for these companies, it's like it's money's always weird. You're like, okay, you're giving me this great opportunity, but it's like, you won't let me hire my deputy editor as a staff member, but then there's this like massive amount of marketing money that the marketing guy is like, oh, we're going to do the word is brand activation for the Nib. I mean, and it's cool to be a part of, but you're like, they must be spending a ton of money. They're renting the place out. They did a party with open bar, and they flew in. They had other people like that. They had podcasts people flown in to sort of do PR for their projects and stuff. It was just like,
I heard there were fake protesters with like signs.
oh yeah, they had these ideas that we weren't. They didn't necessarily originate with us, and we wouldn't have.
Don't look at me. I wasn't paid for that.
Yeah, they wouldn't.
I protested on my own.
They kind of had, they had like Nib protesters with sort of like Nib signs, and then they MSNBC sets up a pavilion outside to record, and then you see like Philadelphia stuff in the back and people, and then the protesters went out back so that it would be seen on TV, and then they show. And then the marketing people can show that it was seen on TV, and it was a weird thing to be a part of. A lot of it was really cool, and then some of it I was like, why are we doing this?
Yeah. So, eventually, obviously, the first look era also ended.
Yes.
And then afterwards, we go into the, I will call the magazine era. But it sounds like you had always wanted to do a magazine. And I remember having dinner with you in, I think it was like 2015. I came over to your house and you're like, so I have this crazy idea. I want to make a magazine. And you had like all of these magazines that you were like showing me that you were really excited about. So obviously this has always been like a brainchild. So like what enabled that to be real? Finally.
I just, the magazine did launch under First Look. We did a Kickstarter for the magazine. And, I think to their credit, they let me do it. I pitched them. I had a plan. We hadn't asked for any money before. We had a huge newsletter list, people reading us daily for years. And I had been thinking about monetization. I hate even just reflexively say that word. I had been thinking about how to actually fund it and make it sustainable since we were at Medium. And so anyway, they let me do it, and we made like 60,000 in a day. The Kickstarter was like, I think we ended at $150,000 or more. A lot of people bought these things. Now they were buying 4 magazines, so there was a ton of expenses. It was basically $150,000 for comics and printing and shipping of the magazine, and then we launched a sort of membership subscriber thing, and then of course that's going well, and then again sort of layoff out of nowhere, kind of they're pivoting to different stuff, but then we go independent, and that is where most of the magazines come out. So
First Look kind of enabled you to get it started then.
Yeah.
And then you took it from there. I'll pivot to a different. So Ben told this story last night about being at a protest and bleeding and having your first thought be, this is gonna make a great nib comic.
Yeah.
And you had, and like, you also said like that you protested on your own. We'll make that very clear. But you did have people that were making comics for you out in the world doing all kinds of stuff. Like Sophie and I went to Standing Rock, and Eric Thurman covered the Umbrella protests, and then Victoria Lamasco got smuggled into Belarus in the trunk of a car. I think I have that slide I think it's a few slides back. Oh, it's forward. Yeah. There we go. And then you have like people like me doing weird stuff where I'm
stunts.
like, weird stunts, like drinking urine, or I remember
for the health benefits.
Yes.
Purported.
I talked to my doctor about it and everything. You can read the comics online. And I remember one time I went with a bunch of ghost hunters and like spent the night in like a haunted old haunted house in like rural Arkansas. And I didn't make a comic about it because that was like right when I think that was like right at the end of the Medium era, because we lost funding for that. But I did get a kill fee. So I ended up spending the night in this haunted house with a bunch of ghost hunters. And I had all like hours of recordings that never got transcribed, and I got paid $250 to have a sleepover. But I remember emailing you.
Right.
I didn't have to draw anything.
Yeah, that's
the
dream.
I have to draw it.
But I remember emailing, like, I think you and Larry and probably a few other people, like, okay, I'm about to drive to rural Arkansas to spend the night in a house with a bunch of people I've never met before. So if I get murdered, like, that's on you. You know, like Andrew Greenstone got a microchip, like, implanted in his hand.
You know, I said if he was gonna do it anyway, he could do a comic book about it. I didn't. He would. That guy would have. He did a couple of crazy things.
See,
He went to the Wasteland Festival, and he had all sorts of ideas for
some
traveling places.
underground satanic, like, cult
Yeah.
thing. So you have people making comics that are out in the world doing all kinds of wacky stuff. Were you ever worried that something terrible would happen?
Well, I guess now that you remind me of all this stuff, maybe. You know, it was. I wanted to. I really wanted to make stuff like that happen. You know, like all this. We weren't sending people to places a lot. That was, you know, we had to kind of like splurge to. You know, we did pay a little bit of travel cost to people and stuff like that, but I wanted to really operate like a magazine and make stuff happen that wasn't going to happen otherwise. So that included both people pitching us, you know, weird ideas or going somewhere or drinking urine or putting a microchip in them to become a cyborg with like body mod people. And, you know, the same type of stuff writers do all the time. I just wanted to make a cartoonist happen with the cartoon magazine. And then also we were assigning a lot of stuff too. So like there was protests happening and it'd be like, you know, do we know someone in that city who would be good at this? To like go down and talk to people and draw them and get quotes or something. And, you know, it was nice to be able to do that for a while. Because I really wanted to do that as opposed to just run comics that people were going to do anyway, or they were just pitching us like, you know, straightforward, like, I want to do a history comic about this, which is good, and we did run that type of stuff a lot. But, you know,
Which I'm glad
the
about,
stuff that I thought I was really proud of is like comics where people are traveling or doing journalism or other types of stuff that just it wasn't gonna exist unless we published it.
Yeah,
That was me dugging your question of whether I put anyone at severe risk of bodily harm.
I don't think that was my question, but yeah, you can feel free to answer that as well.
No, I mean, I don't think it was a huge worry. No. And luckily, everything's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I didn't end up in a ditch in the middle of rural Arkansas.
Yeah.
That I was curious actually about, because I know that you did send some people places, like Maria Stolen went to Greece to cover the Golden Dawn trial, and was curious about how you decided what stories to put resources into, because like obviously you had more resources than most people get to have for these kinds of things, but it's finite. And so like how did you decide like which stories to put those resources into?
Sort of a combination of, you know, we had to sort of ration out like, well, we could only do, you know, one piece like that every 2 months or something like that. And then who's pitching us stuff. And then what is happening that we want to cover that we're not covering that we can make happen. Or does anybody have an idea, especially with the magazines? It was like, is there something that we're not covering that, like all the pitches, we get in a bunch of pitches and we, you know, go through them all, and there's usually more great stuff than we could ever commission for it, so we have to, like, you know, do a lot of hard choices, and we try to get, you know, a mix of stuff, a mix of topics and approaches and funny stuff, political stuff, history, memoir. But then it's like, is there something we can do for, you know, the family issue that like isn't just coming in as a pitch that we can make happen? So like for that issue, we hired, I think we were at First Look, so we were able to have cross-brand synergy, as somebody in marketing probably said, with The Intercept, and Ryan Devereaux did a piece that Kate Wheeler illustrated that was about, you know, family separation at the border and child separation and like the horrible shit that was happening with you know, his sources that he had that of people whose, you know, lives have been destroyed practically by this. And it's like, well, you know, we didn't have anyone with that kind of, we didn't have to spend any extra money on that one because The Intercept provided the reporter, we provided the artist. But it was the same theory, which is like, you know, can we make something happen? Can we spend an extra $1,500 to like make a piece that like really stands out of like, especially I wanted to do that with the magazine features. And it's like, can we send anyone, you know, every theme that came up, it was like, can we send someone to somewhere that would like, you know, reflect on the theme of the issue? Actually, now that I'm thinking of the family issue, we did two things. I think so it was the lighter piece that wasn't family separation was a twin convention that Babs knew and their brother. Do you know their brother's name?
I can't remember their brother's name.
Twin brother. Anyway, he's a journalist and and Babs is a cartoonist. So we were like, I think they might have pitched it. I forget exactly how it came about, but it's like, okay, well, you got twins who are a cartoonist and a writer, and you go to the twin convention for the Nib family magazine. It's just like, we're making that happen. We'll pay you to go. You know, it's like that type of stuff would pop up.
Yeah. Yeah. I have some, I guess, okay, I do kind of related to that. Like, I know that you would do annual, like, summits in Portland every year to make plans for the year. And so maybe this is kind of related. Like, how do you plan a year of publication? Are there certain things like, okay, we want to cover more of this this year. We want to make sure that, you know, we're, like, how do you plan for a year of the Nib? What does that look like?
Well, it was mostly around the magazine and planned for a year of the themes. And it was kind of a joke where it would be like, you know, the first year was a good template. It's like the first 4 issues was death, family, which one was 3? Empire and scams. So it's like we would have like, you know, 1 or 2 that were like explicitly political, like Empire. Then we'd have, you know, family. It can be anything, but obviously you're going to get political stuff. You're going to get personal pieces. You could see a mainstream magazine doing, you know, their family issue and what they would do some version of it, but then we would want to do like the Nib version of it. And then we'd usually have a bleak topic like death, and then, you know, something that's kind of more fun like scams. It obviously allows you to get political, but like, so it was sort of this combination of like, we would just throw a bunch of words, you know, we'd have like an ideation session basically, like throw a bunch of words on the board and try to figure out, you know, we didn't want to be like relentlessly negative and be doing intensely political and negative themes all the time. But even when we did, you know, like the death issue, I mean, I was real proud of. We had really serious stuff. I mean, one is a memoir of a cartoonist child dying shortly after birth, which is like one of the most intense things we publish. And
yeah, I read it this morning and I cried. I pulled one of them.
And then we had, you know, funny stuff next to it. You know, it was like, so I mean, that's what we try to do. So I guess it was mostly around the themes of the magazine is the answer to the question.
Yeah. Well, I do want to leave a little bit of time for Q&A. So I guess I should, because I could go on asking you questions this whole time. Although I do want to start Q&A with my own question.
That's just continuing the panel.
Yeah.
That's what.
Matt, question. Did I ever show you the video I took of myself drinking urine?
No, I would remember that one.
Do you want to see it?
Yes.
Seems like a private thing for y'all to do.
No, absolutely not.
It's going up there? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not watching this. No, I'm going to my happy place. I don't need to see that.
Time for people to leave.
It's very awkward.
Oh, the sound's not hooked up anymore.
Oh, damn.
Whatever, it's fine. You can hear it on here.
Just email it to me.
That's good.
Oh, did we take this down? It unhooked up.
The internet might have taken it down.
Oh.
I think this is God talking.
Yeah.
The library does not allow videos like this.
Whatever. I'll show it to you later, I
Okay.
guess.
What a shame.
What a shame. What a shame. Connor.
So you almost touched on this. How do you balance and this is also definitely a question for Ben, because I don't know how much your work balances these serious topics with the levity and and there's always this satirical bite, but then there's not exactly like this what's the word? Anyway, how do you guys balance that?
You did cartoons of both variety. Go ahead.
Yeah, I feel like you're a good person to answer that question.
Oh, the balance? I think that it's like, I think any comic, and maybe this has to do with like my age, because it does seem like there's like a slight generational gap on this. But like for me, I find that I have to sort of like justify why this really hard emotional thing is a comic. Because there's something, at least personally, that feels sort of inherently disrespectful about broaching something that's like even like personally really difficult. So part of that is like, well, okay, how do I keep this person like to stick with me, you know? And for me, like in the beginning, a lot of it was like, well, like you can't judge me for this. This is my story. So I'd be in the comic. And then, you know, and so I think just I naturally overly cope with humor. You know what I mean? So I think that often is like how I approached it.
Second row stripes.
Has a public citizen ever complimented you on your work, or like looked at one of your work and say, "Oh, you made a good point there"?
Well, I
great
did.
question.
I forget who it was, but during the healthcare debates, one of them, you know, for Obamacare on the floor of the House, I forget the exact cartoon. The setup is like conservatives were saying if you were fined for not having Obamacare, you know, it's tyrannical, basically, is the short argument. And I did some kind of cartoon that was about seatbelts, and, you know, you get fined if you're not wearing a seatbelt, but we don't, unless you're like an extreme libertarian, you know, you typically don't raise too many objections to the concept of that being a law. And was a lawmaker, I forget who, printed it out in a, you know, giant thing and talked about it on the floor of Congress during official debate. It was on C-SPAN and stuff. So I guess that was like, you know, that was, and usually I don't want politicians to like my work, right? But I mean, I understand he was a Democrat, obviously, and was making a point with it. So that was the one time, I think.
It is funny, like how many of your personal comics show up just in my feed as like gotchas.
Yeah.
Oh, all the time. All the time.
I'm like, why did you bring in my boss to yell at me?
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, they a couple of them got around for sure.
I did tell Andy and Larry that I would bombard you with this video at this event, so I'm gonna make this guy play it.
Oh boy. Oh, it's just
It's me.
yeah.
Give it a shot.
Let's do it.
She's giving it a shot, that's for sure.
Emi Gennis. And this is a glass of my urine, which I'm going to drink. It's mostly clear.
You're stalling.
Oh, I was.
Yeah.
I didn't post this because I decided I looked like shit.
Why would you just sip it? No, why are you sipping it?
Did you expect him to chug it?
Yes, that's easier.
Well, I wasn't experienced at drinking urine.
Not the best.
But it's not the
Okay.
That's it. I promised to Larry that I would play that. Show me the
you're gonna
slideshow
check.
again. All right, who else has a question?
That was part of our fact-checking process.
Yeah, that's the dialogue that I put directly in the comic too.
Yeah.
What was the point of the drink of the year?
That's a good question. That's a very good
I asked myself that like
Was it
halfway
your
through
idea or
making
somebody else?
so I was on like a weird pseudoscience beat
Yeah.
basically.
That was kind of one of the things I was wanted to get to earlier. Is we almost had these like correspondents, Andrew Greenstone would kind of go do crazy stuff. We'd have people who would go to attend protests. Emi was doing like debunking pseudoscience and supernatural stuff. So it was like people who drill holes in their heads, people who are all about drinking pee for health benefits, and then the ghost busters.
Right. Yeah, and I like to participate within reason, like, oh, I'll go spend the night in a haunted house, or like, oh, I can drink here and I'm not going to drill a hole in my head. But I did ask myself that about like halfway through making the comic. I'm like, I'm drinking my urine and spending like weeks drawing it for clickbait, basically. It felt like clickbait at a certain point, but it was fun. We probably have time for like one, maybe two more questions if they're fast.
Why don't you want politicians to like your work?
Why don't you want politicians to like your work?
I think you'd probably be doing it wrong if they were loving it. I mean, obviously, if they make a point against the right, people on the left are going to like it, and that's to be expected, I suppose. But I certainly not. The objective is not to flatter politicians or anything like that.
Is it true that Ted Cruz is a big fan of the nib?
Is it true that Ted Cruz is a big fan of the nib? I had not heard that.
Well,
Is that true?
He buys all of Ben's originals.
That's true.
Wait, is that true?
Yeah.
He
No,
said-
it's not true. No,
He probably buys them to burn.
You could have
yeah,
said
he would buy them
anything.
to burn them, I'm sure. I'm all digital now, so joke's on him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, do I have a last question?
I guess something, since no one's asking a question, something that I really liked was that you all were taking all this funding, and my experience is just like a random cartoonist. Like I remember when I started, there was like you guys would be like, oh, like can you write about the NAACP? Like there was a bunch of things that like I don't care about, and consistently I'd be like, I don't really care about this. I would like to write about it in this way, and you always were like, oh, that's great.
We weren't too overbearing. I mean,
Yeah.
it was, I mean, we did a lot. We did more editing than you typically see for comics because we were
But
kind
you
of
paid us
functioning as
more.
a magazine, and especially with like the longer form scripts and everything, we would kind of fact check them, or we'd be like, oh, you need a good more of a good lead, because we're thinking about it as like being read online and competing for attention. But yeah, we've tried to give everybody a lot of creative freedom.
All right, I think.
What now?
What'd you say?
What now?
Oh, I thought you were telling me that our time was up.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have one more question from the person that's in charge of kicking us out. What now?
Well, for me, I don't mean this the way it sounds at first, but it's like I'm the one who's kind of most affected by the nib. By the end we were a skeleton crew, and that's part of the reason why I feel good about it. Is like everybody's working on graphic novels, and Ben's got a graphic novel deal, Maddie and Larry and everybody else does. So that after 2019, after that layoff, they haven't been working for the nib full time. So they've moved on to do other things, and they were working with the nib a lot, and it's sad. For me, I'm like freed up from political cartoons and the nib for the first time since it started, and political cartoons in 20 years. I'm just still doing comics. I mean, I got a bunch of ideas for my own comics that I haven't got to get to because I was running the nib, and I'm going to try to get them off the ground in the next few years. I got mostly creator-owned stuff like fiction, and I'll eventually, I think, do some more nonfiction too. But I'm gonna take a little break from nonfiction and do my weird genre ideas.
It's awesome. Ben, what are you working on right now?
I'm doing a long, I guess like ostensibly like history comic about black armed liberation movements in the United States starting in 1900. And as Matt said, like, like at a certain point, like I was too busy to do regular nib comics. So it's definitely not like I'm like lost, you know what I mean? Lost for work to do. And I know that's true for a lot of cartoonists. I'm like about to be just a full-time graphic novelist.
Yeah, I also have been too busy to do nib comics for several years because I've been working on my book about doomed expeditions, What to Pack for Certain Death, inspired by a piece I did for the nib.
Yeah.
So we've all got stuff going on. I know, Matt, what table are you at upstairs?
2, front and center.
All right. Ben, are you at a table upstairs?
Yeah, I'm at 75. And also, I think the Billy Ireland still has the comics journalism show up, of which there's like a bunch
they
of...
have
No, it's down?
Raina Tail Mount.
All right, never mind. You missed
All right. Anyway, come find them
You missed
upstairs. Check out a bunch of the other cartoonists. Thank you so much for coming.
I will say too, if you don't have the scams issue of the nib, it's out of print. I got like 3 left, and that's it, like forever.